Okay, we're going to move on this afternoon. Schutz. He's here with us at the University of Nevada, Reno, and he's going to talk to us about the use of fixed time artificial insemination to increase profitability.
Hello, thank you for the introduction. Let me start sharing my screen. And to talk about a topic that I really like is the use of fixed time artificial insemination to increase profitability of cow-calf operations. So let's see if I can show you some of interesting data that we have about the technique and how that can be used to help profitability of cow-calf operations. Oops, it's not. Oh, there you go. Profitability of cow-calf operations is affected by several factors, including pounds of calf produced, selling price of calves, and cost of production. And all of these can be actually affected by reproductive management. So let's see more about that. So let's focus here a little bit about the calves wean per cow. That's a big factor affecting profitability of cow-calf operations. So this can be affected by a percentage of calf crop weaned and weaning weight, for example. And weaning weight can be influenced by birth date. For example, calves that are born early in the calving season will have a greater weaning weight at the end of the calving season. And it's also influenced a lot by breed and genetics. So having good genetic merits for weaning weight will really make a difference in your weaning weight in the property. And reproductive biotechniques, they affect percentage of calf crop weaned, affects reproductive parameters, affects pregnancy rates, and affects weaning weight. I'm going to talk specifically about how we influence birth date here and how can we also accelerate the genetic selection for weaning weight using reproductive biotechniques. So here's a challenge. So one of the biggest objectives, if we want to have a profitable property, cow-calf property, is to have one calf per cow per year, right? So there's a challenge here. Let's see about that. So we have in a year 365 days. You have already 283 days of gestation of a cow, and then you have a period of recovery of the reproductive system after parturition. That takes about 40 to 60 days for a cow to recover to be able to get pregnant again. And then that leaves us with 22 to 42 days in the year for the cow to get pregnant. It's not a lot. And then considering the estrous cycles that on average takes 21 days, think about that. Each cow has a chance of 1 to 2 chances to get pregnant every year. So think about that. Some cows will only have 1 chance to get pregnant. And if they don't, then you either need to discard this cow or provide a free hotel for 1 more year of this cow to try to get pregnant in the next year. So it's challenging. So let's just consider a possible scenario here. Let's say we are using natural service only. We're not using any reproductive biotechnique in the property. And let's say we start May 1st to June 20th. That's our breeding season for this property. So in year 1, this cow, even though we started on May 1st, she took about 2 estrous cycles to get pregnant. So she got pregnant on May 20th. So in the year 2, after she took 60 days to recover from that parturition. And then when she was ready when she started cycling again, she took 2 estrous cycles to get pregnant. So she got pregnant very close to the end of the breeding season. She got pregnant in June 17 in year 2. So guess what's happened with this cow? Once she takes again about 60 days to recover, and then she took, if she takes 2 estrous cycles to get pregnant again, she's out of the breeding season. That is the kind of cow that won't get pregnant every year. In the 3rd year, she's already out. It could be the case. This is just an example. Of course, some cows do better than that, and some cows will be in the same scenario, for example, in the year 4. But what means usually when you only use natural service is that the cow's conception gets later in the breeding season every year, okay? Because of this timing of recovery of the reproductive system after parturition, And because sometimes they just don't get pregnant in one estrous cycle, they need 2 estrous cycles to get pregnant. So let's discuss a little bit more about the technique and how this technique will change this scenario. So the fixed time artificial insemination, as the name implies, what we do here, we breed the cows through artificial insemination in a fixed time that we determine. Okay, so what's going to happen here? We are going to, by the use of hormones, we are going to synchronize the estrus and ovulation of the cows, and then we're going to breed them through artificial insemination in a time defined by us. If I want to breed my cows on May 15 at 10 a.m., this is possible nowadays with the use of these 3 hormones here, the GnRH releasing hormone, the gonadotropin releasing hormone, the progesterone, and the prostaglandin F2 alpha. If we apply them in a specific period of time, we're going to be able to determine when we're going to breed the cows through artificial insemination. Okay. And what is the advantage of doing that? So it facilitates the use of artificial insemination by concentrating estrus. So what that means is that if you don't have to observe estrus, and you determine when you're going to breed the cows, you go there in one afternoon or one morning and you breed all the cows at the same time. So that facilitates the use of artificial insemination, and that's going to, of course, allows us to use bows with desired characteristics of progeny. So those EPDs that were mentioned here before, the expected progeny differences that we select for a bow, for example, that we're going to use through artificial insemination. We can use a semen catalog to choose which bows we want. And then we can select, for example, we want to improve the weaning weight of our herd through genetics, okay? So it's possible to do that through the use of artificial insemination, right? It's going to minimize the use of bows in your property. You don't need to eliminate the use of bows. Usually what I like to recommend is to do fixed time artificial insemination and then release the cows after some days with the bows for them to keep breeding these cows. And then, but if you do that, you can minimize the use of bows. Instead of having one bow to 20 to 30 cows, you can have less than that, because some of the cows will already be pregnant in the beginning of the breeding season through artificial insemination. It's going to accelerate the postpartum recovery of the cows. This is very important if we're thinking about pregnancy rates and if we're thinking about changing the birth dates of the calves, because that's going to allow us to breed the cows very early in the breeding season. It's going to then increase pregnancy rates, because once you start breeding the cows very early in the breeding season, there's a tendency for them to have more time to get pregnant in the breeding season. And it's going to concentrate calving at the beginning of the calving season. And this is going to represent heavier calves at the end of the weaning time, okay? So because most of your calves are born early in the breeding season, they will be older when you're weaning your calves. So let's go back to possible scenarios, but now let's compare possible scenarios with the fixed time artificial insemination and with the natural service. So again, let's pretend that we have a breeding season here that goes from May 1st to June 20th. So in year one, the cow got pregnant again. Let's say this is a heifer. She got pregnant on May 20th. So a possible scenario with the fixed time artificial insemination, now we're speeding up her recovery, and she took 40 days to recover from the parturition. So she's now in 40 days, she's able to be bred, okay? Then you can breed the cows right in the first day of your breeding season if you want. You can synchronize the cows to do that. And then you can expect by the technique that at least 40% of your cows in the program will be pregnant in your first day of the breeding season, okay? So that is a big advantage of the technique. And then comparing to a possible scenario here of natural breeding, when the cow took a little bit longer to recover from the postpartum period to be pregnant again, and again she took 2 estrous cycles to get pregnant. Even if she would take 1 estrous cycle to get pregnant, she would be pregnant later than in the possible scenario with fixed time artificial insemination. Okay, so the fixed time artificial insemination allows you to speed up this recovery postpartum and the animals to become pregnant earlier in the breeding season. So here is just an example from publication back in 2013, effects of fixed time artificial insemination on pregnancy rates. So on the y-axis here, you have proportion of non-pregnant animals, and in the x-axis, you have the breeding season in days, okay? So of course, in the day 0 of the breeding season, you have 100% of your cows that are not pregnant at the moment, right? So now let's see here, we have a dashed line here that represents the natural service, and we have that continuous line there that represents fixed time artificial insemination plus natural service, okay? So that means that we use fixed time artificial insemination, and then we bred the cows with the bulls after that. So pay attention what happened here at the about 50 days of breeding season, okay? So that's where when they, what happened in the 10 days after breeding season, that's the time where they did the fixed time artificial insemination in this study here. So about more than 50% of the cows were pregnant at 10 days of breeding season with the fixed time artificial insemination. So you can see that it's sped up a lot the pregnancy rates of these cows already. If you compare there in the 10 days of the breeding season, in the dash group there, it's about 10% of the cows were pregnant just with natural service. So that's already affecting a lot the birth rates, the time of the birth that you're gonna have of these cows in the calving season, okay? So this is the big advantage. So in the end, because of that, because they already were pregnant earlier in the breeding season, when we got to the end of the breeding season here, they used 90 days of breeding season. We had way more cows pregnant than in the study, in the property that was just natural service here. So factors affecting fixed time artificial insemination success. This is important to discuss because sometimes producers try the fixed time artificial insemination, they don't get such a great result, and that's frustrating, right? So one of the main things that affects the success of the fixed time artificial insemination is body condition score, is nutrition. So it's shown that in a scale 1 to 10, cows with a body condition score of 5 or greater than 5 have greater pregnancy rates at the end of the breeding season whenever using fixed time artificial insemination plus natural service. And when you have you don't need to observe estrus in this program, but just for knowing, just to observe the success of the program, the success of the cyclicity of the cows, researchers have been observing estrus behavior of the cows when they are in the program. And what's known now is that cows that express heat during the fixed time artificial insemination, that means that they responded well to the hormonal treatments, they tend to have better pregnancy rates, okay? And let's see here an example of what we did here in July 2021. So I do that, I've been doing that every year now at the main station here, field lab at UNR. So I don't have the results yet for the 2022 breeding season, but from the 2021 breeding season in July, we used 43 multipurpose cows, and then from these 43 multipurpose cows, just for the fixed time artificial insemination, we had about 65% pregnancy. Okay, so 10 days after the beginning of the breeding season, we had 65% of the cows pregnant in that year. And so based on, I did a division there of the body condition score, and cows that were in between 4 to 5 body condition score, we had about 63% pregnant. And when we had cows with 6 to 7 body condition score, we had about 87% of the cows pregnant. And in this case here, that's not a rule, that's usually not the case actually, but the body condition score of 8. In this case, we had 2 cows and they didn't get pregnant, okay? So it's just a very small number of animals, so we don't know exactly what happened there. Body condition score 8 is still considered good condition score to get the cows pregnant. Although increasing the body condition score sometimes is detrimental to reproduction, but I would consider that 8 is still good. But in this case here, these cows didn't get pregnant. And then we did also look into heat expression in our protocol here. We use a heat expression patch, and then we consider high expression, moderate expression, or low expression of heat based on the level of scratching that these cows had in the heat expression patch. And then high expression cows had 72% pregnancy rate. Moderate expression of the estrus, they were somewhat mounted by their counterparts. They had about 71% pregnancy rate. But then when they didn't show a lot of estrus before the breeding, they had less pregnancy rate, was 50% in our case here. And that's one thing that my lab is doing right now. We're investigating what influences estrus expression and pregnancy rates of cows when we're using these hormonal treatments here. So I do a lot of cell culture of the cells that produce the estradiol hormone. That's the hormone of the estrus, to see which factors, nutritional factors, for example, are affecting that. So here is just an example of a fixed time artificial insemination protocol. There are several protocols out there to use. There are protocols that are for heifers. There are protocols that are for multipurpose beef cows. There's protocols for dairy cows. This is for a multipurpose beef cow. And this is the one that's similar to the one we used in our study here. So 7-day co-sync plus progesterone implant. So we use that's to show you how much we need to manipulate the cows. So we apply the first hormone generate, and we when we place the progesterone implant in the cows on day 0 of the program, you determine when it's going to be the day 0 of your program. And then on day 7, you remove the progesterone implant, you apply prostaglandin F2 alpha, and then with 60 to 66 hours after the removal of the implant and the application of prostaglandin F2 alpha, you apply again GnRH, and at the same time, you inseminate the cows. So these artificial inseminations performed without the need of the heat detection. So you can see here right away that we are determining the time of the breeding that we want to do for these cows. So with that, I thank you for the attention. There are many more things to explore about the topic. This was just a short talk about some of the advantages of the technique and some challenges as well.
Okay, we do have a couple of questions for you.
All righty.
So the first one is, what is the cost of fixed time, or what is it? Fixed time artificial insemination. Is this cost effective for a small versus a large herd?
This is an excellent question, and the cost will really be affected by the number of animals you have in your property. And so I always recommend you to do the following comparison. So I don't know from the top of my mind how much is per cow, and again, this is going to vary according to where you buy the products and how many products you're going to buy. You might be able to get discounts when you're buying more products, for example. So one thing that you need to take into account is that how many bulls you have in your property, how much these bulls are costing you. And then usually, because you have about 40% of your cows getting pregnant or more, usually even more than that, but at least 40% of your cows, if they are in a good body condition score, will get pregnant. So usually because of that, you can eliminate a good number of bulls in the property. And they, of course, cost money for you to produce them and to maintain them. There is vet cost, there is nutrition cost, there is examination of the breeding every year that you have for these bulls. So this is one of the costs you need to take into account. Also, another cost that's going to be that you need to consider is that because you're going to use artificial insemination, you tend to have an increase in your weaning weight because of genetics improvement, among other things that you can select for genetics improvement. You're going to have cows calves being born early in the calving season, and also you have a concentration of the parturition in the breeding season, in the calving season, so that facilitates the management, for example. So these are costs as well that you can consider. But research has shown that in general, because of the advantages that you have in genetic improvement, in minimizing the bulls in the property, and in more days of the calves growing before weaning, you have a cheaper option doing fixed time artificial insemination than using bulls. And to be quite honest, you don't even need to train your staff to do it yourself. You can hire a veterinarian, for example, and the veterinarian knows how to breed the animals. I used to do that when I was a vet in the fields. I would go there, do all the protocol, do the breeding of all animals in one day, and then I would do also the pregnancy check of all the animals to see how many were pregnant from the technique. And so you don't even need to be a person who knows how to inseminate your herd. You can hire someone to come. Let's come on Tuesday at 10 a.m. to breed all your animals in that time, and then you don't need to worry about you having to do it.
So, and I think that leads to our next question, which our participants are wondering, what is the best use of this? I mean, is it most useful in dairy herds, in replacement heifers, or just all cattle overall, in your opinion?
Excellent question. So I think it's beneficial to all categories of cattle, but so dairy cattle, for example, is very important because dairy cows, for example, they tend to have a silent estrus sometimes. And then if you have, it's a different, let's say it's a different presentation than the one that I gave today, because today I was talking about concentrating parturition and all that. You don't want that in dairy cows. So in dairy cows, the big advantages, for example, you can create a calendar very precise with your dairy cows to do, for example, in groups of the cows, and to not allow them to delay the conception, because some of the dairy cows, for example, one of the problems they have besides conception rates is actually hiding the estrus. And so if you lose one estrus of your dairy cows, then you'll have to wait 21 days, about 21 days for them to get pregnant again, which means that you're delaying 21 days of the next lactation, and that represents cost for you. And for beef cattle, I prefer to do, many people are doing heifers already because they want to keep going for the genetic selection that they can do with artificial insemination. But what I like to do a lot, what I think is very advantageous in the breeding of the beef cows, cow-calf operations, is that cows in the postpartum, they tend to have a delayed recovery of that parturition that heifers don't have. So that is the big advantage for me in cow-calf operations, is that to speed up that recovery by using these hormones. And so you can help the cows to achieve that challenge. That's one calf per year per cow. So I think by using in multipurpose cows, you really have the advantage of speeding up the recovery of the cows in the puerperium, in the postpartum period, because you can minimize that, speed up to about 40 days after gestation, they will be ready to breed. And if you leave the cows naturally doing that, some of them will take about almost 60 days, sometimes 60 days to recover, and then they delay.
Perfect. Okay, our last question is there a difference in the pregnancy rate between, in your opinion, range cows and meadow/pasture cows? Would there be that difference?
So this is something very it's very interesting question, you know, and everything influences the pregnancy rates of your herd. So for example, range versus other systems, there might be differences inherent to the system. So it's going to depend, for example, how much intensification you put in the property. But the fixed time artificial insemination can help all kinds of properties. Even if you have range cows, for example, the fixed time artificial insemination, since you're breeding them all at one time, you can bring them to manage them only in one time, and then you finalize the breeding one all at once. which is advantageous even for range cows if you have some place to manage them during a short period of time and then release them with the bulls again. So the fixed time artificial insemination can help all kinds of properties.
Okay, and we have one more question that I just want to go to real quick, and it's asking, are there any studies done in regards to the stress levels in correlation with pregnancy rates with AI versus live cover, given the number of times they're going to have to be run through the chute, etc.?
This is an excellent question as well. All of the questions were very good. But this one, for example, there might be some factors stressing cows overall. So that's why we recommend to always, when you're managing cows, try to minimize stress as much as possible when you're doing the practice. But for example, when these studies have been doing that, this fixed time artificial insemination is in various environments. And then usually they still tend to have a more than 40% pregnancy rate. So even though, for example, you might have an effect of the manipulation of these cows in terms of stress, that is not as impactful to minimize a lot the pregnancy rates. But of course, it would be interesting to see, for example, using fixed time artificial insemination, high stress environment versus low stress environment. For sure, there would be difference. So that's why I always recommend try to keep silent environment when we're working, try to keep people that are surrounding the cows are gentle with the animals and all that. This is always challenging because depending on the system you have, it's very hard. But it's still, even that you stress the cows a little bit when you're manipulating that, they still will show you a good result that could be improved if the stress is minimized.
Perfect. I want to thank you today for joining us
Thank you.
providing this information and